In this session, we're going to be talking about why does it hurt so badly. I remember about 2 months into my divorce, I was talking to my mom on the phone. I was sitting in the parking lot of a store parking lot, and I was just a total wreck. I was filled with this deep emotional pain, and no matter what I did, it would not go away. It was there when I woke up. The second I woke up in the morning, it came flooding back in, and it stayed with me throughout the day until I finally would fall asleep at night. And I would get no relief. And I remember telling my mom, I said, "Mom, it feels like someone has died." And that's the best way I could describe it, is that it feels like a death. And you know, something has died. Sadly, your marriage has died, and you are grieving the loss of your marriage. And that is why it hurts so badly. And I remember shortly after that phone call going into my counselor, and I was really in despair. I just was feeling like the rest of my life was going to be filled with this overwhelming emotional pain. And it just put me in a state of despair, because I could not imagine living the rest of my life, many years hopefully, filled with this kind of pain. And so I dragged myself into her office, and I remember just sobbing and explaining to her how painful this was. And she explained to me something called the grief cycle. And she said, "You know what, Vince, you're grieving. You're grieving the loss of your marriage. You're grieving the loss of the dreams, of the hopes of that person that you love. And that's why it hurts so badly. And that's very natural and normal to grieve." But I always thought grief was something that only happened when somebody actually physically died. I could understand that. I've been through that before. But I never really associated it with my marriage and my divorce. And it made total sense to me once she explained it to me. And so she explained this concept of the grief cycle. And that's what we're talking about in this session, so that you have a real understanding of why you're going through this intense emotional pain. And so, you know, there's 5 steps to the grief cycle. There's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining, there's sadness, and then finally acceptance. And the goal of grieving is to work through that cycle, not to run away from it, not to avoid it, not to mask it. And so many people do. So many people try to find ways to avoid the pain, and actually the pain is part of the healing. It's kind of like, you know, if you hurt your knee or something and you went to physical therapy, you know, part of the rehabilitation is to exercise that knee to strengthen it, to help with the healing process. But that's painful, but it's required. Because if you don't, then you won't get full function of your knee back. You'll forever be in pain, or it will forever be bothering you, and you won't be able to live your life fully because of that knee pain and your hurt knee. Well, grieving is the same way. Working through the grief cycle is really critical to your healing. So don't avoid it. I urge you to lean into it. And this is where your Catholic faith is so important, because it gives you such great gifts that will help you and strengthen you and comfort you as you work through this grief cycle. And we talk about that in this session, how you can work through your grief, the different stages that you're in, and the things that you can do to help you work through that stage and not get stuck. That's one of the important things, because people can get stuck in these stages, and you don't want that to happen. So read through the session. It gives some great tips and great advice on how to grieve, how to work through the grief cycle, and kind of the warning signs of if you are getting stuck. One of the common places people get stuck is anger. They get angry and they stay angry for a long period of time, and it makes them bitter. And that's not what you want. But you want to work through this so you can let it go and resume a full functioning life. And that's the importance of grieving. So Complete the rest of your exercises here, particularly on the reflect portion, on the act portion, and on the you portion. And that will help you better understand the grief cycle. It'll give you some great tools and techniques to help you work through that grief cycle. And remember that it's part of the grief cycle that it has a beginning, has a middle, but it also has an end. This pain will end one day. And the more you embrace the grief cycle and the more you really get active in working through it, the sooner you'll get through it. People always ask me, how do I know when the grief cycle is over? Well, and one of the key ways you can know is when you begin to plan again. Because when you're grieving, you're consumed with that emotional pain. It's all you can think about. It's all you can do to put one foot forward. It's all you can do is to get through the day. You can't even think about, tomorrow, let alone, next week or next month or next year. That's just way too overwhelming. And so as you begin to work through this grief cycle and get to the point of acceptance, you'll notice you'll begin to think about the future and begin to plan for the future. And that's a good sign that you're working through your grief. Also, don't be surprised if you bounce around in the grief cycle. You may be angry one day, you may be sad the next, you may be bargaining with God. Please, Lord, don't let this happen the next day. Or even hour to hour, you can bounce around in these stages. And ultimately, though, when you work through it properly, you will reach a point of acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean that you are happy you went through the divorce. It means that you've accepted it as a reality in your life and that you are now moving forward. You're not letting it define you. You're not letting it anchor you in the past. You've accepted it. It has happened. And now you're moving forward with your life. You're moving forward with your healing, you're moving forward with rebuilding, and you're moving forward with completing the purpose with which God gave you. So I hope that helps. Work through those exercises and you will move through this grief cycle and benefit from it. God bless you.